Mark Armour said this: rejection doesn't mean you aren't good enough. It means the other person failed to notice what you had to offer. Rejection and bad times are an inevitable part of life's journey, but they will always wake you up to things you weren't paying attention to. Welcome to this week's Hope from the Hills. The Bible says this: the Lord is close to those who are brokenhearted, and he rescues those whose spirits are crushed. That's Psalm 34 and verse 18. Rejection is something that we all face, regardless of our beliefs, social standing, wealth, or even our histories. Whether it's a job we didn't get, a relationship that didn't work, or simply feeling like we don't fit in, rejection can sometimes leave us feeling lost, unworthy, hopeless, or even self-sabotaging. And yet at some point, it's part of each and every one of our lives, and by definition, one of the hardest things that we have to endure. Well, what if rejection isn't the end of the story? What if it's actually a doorway or an opportunity to something greater? Christian believers, there's a profound message of hope that speaks directly to anyone who feels rejected. A message that can resonate with anyone regardless of faith, but have experienced the sting that rejection brings. This hope is rooted in the belief that God is with us, even in our rejection, that according to his infallible promise, he will never leave or forsake us. So wherever you draw your sense of hope and strength, there is a truth that remains. Rejection doesn't define you. It is and always will be a chapter in your story and not the entirety of the whole book. Potentially, we have no greater example of a life rejected than that of the life of Jesus. Jesus, the Son of God, rejected by the very people he came to save. The Bible records that he came to his own and his own did not receive him. Stop for a moment and imagine that. The creator of the universe rejected by his own creation. But Jesus didn't let the rejection define him. Instead, he used it as the catalyst for something far greater. Through his suffering and rejection, he brought about a message of love, forgiveness, and a hope that has transformed countless lives over the centuries and continues to do so today, aware that his purpose went beyond the acceptance and the approval of others. Jesus' experiences show us that rejection is not a rejection of our worth. If even Jesus, who was perfect, faced rejection, how much more can we expect to experience that in our own lives? This doesn't mean that rejection isn't painful, but the critical thing to remember is that rejection doesn't always have to have the final say. Jesus' story didn't end with rejection. It culminated in the resurrection and victory over death. Through his suffering and ultimate rejection on the cross, Jesus provided a way for us to be reconciled with God, showing that God can use even the most painful rejections to fulfill his purposes. In Romans chapter 8 and verse 28, Paul reminds us that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. This means that even in our moments of rejection, God is at work weaving these experiences into a greater plan for our lives. What feels like a closed door might actually be God's way of redirecting us away from our perceived setback as a setup for something better, something that aligns itself more closely with his will and his plan for our lives. More than that, the pruning of rejection often provides an opportunity for unexpected new growth. In the midst of those times of brokenness, we can suddenly find we are most open to God's work in our lives. He is close to the brokenhearted and those whose very spirit is crushed. When we are weak, he is strong. Rejection can lead us to rely more fully on God's strength rather than our own, deepening our faith and drawing us closer to him, enabling us to see beyond the immediate pain of rejection and trust in his perfect plan. Finding hope in the face of rejection is about shifting our perspective. It's about seeing rejection not as the final verdict on our worth, but as part of a larger story that's still unfolding. It's trusting that our value isn't determined by other people's opinions or decisions, but by something outside of ourselves that is deeper and more enduring. So when you face rejection, stop and remember who you are. To God, you are beloved, chosen and accepted, ratified by his promises which never change. Lean in and apprehend his promises, trust in his plans and find hope in the truth that God is with you, working all things together for your good. Your value is not determined by the acceptance of others, but by the unchanging love of God, who has a purpose and plan for your life that no rejection, however overwhelming it might appear, can thwart or take away. there's still a path ahead, and it might just lead to something more beautiful and fulfilling than you could have ever hoped or imagined. I'll see you next time.